Davos witnessed a wave of negative reactions following Donald Trump's remarks. Trump recounted what he described as a phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron. According to Trump, he bluntly told Macron that France would have to raise drug prices, or else the US would impose very high tariffs on French goods.
So when I called up Emmanuel Macron, I watched him yesterday with those beautiful sunglasses. What the hell happened? I said, Emmanuel, you're going to be doubling or tripling? No, no, no. I said, here's the story, Emmanuel. The answer is you're going to do it fast. And if you don't, I'm putting a 25% tariff on everything that you sell into the United States and a 100% tariff on your wines and champagnes. And that's about 10 times more than what I'm requesting. And you're going to do it. I don't want to go public with it, but you may make me do that. No, no, Donald, I will do it. I will do it. It took me, on average, 3 minutes a country saying the same thing. You will do it. They all said, no, 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 I will not do it. You're asking me to double the cost of prescription. I said, that's right, because you've been screwing us for 30 years. And they said, we will not do it. I said, that's all right. On Monday morning, we're putting a 25, 30, 50. I gave different numbers for different countries.
Trump portrayed this exchange as a negotiating victory, claiming that it took him only a few minutes to force other countries to concede. The problem is that this entire story does not hold up politically or factually. First of all, the French president does not have the authority to unilaterally raise drug prices. Drug prices in France are tightly regulated by the social security system and state regulatory agencies, with the aim of protecting consumers. This is not a personal decision by the head of state, nor something that can be changed simply because of a phone call from Washington. The French government later had to publicly reject Trump's account, confirming that drug prices in France remain stable and that there has been no increase in response to outside demands. Trump's decision to tell such a story points to two possibilities. Either he does not understand how the political and healthcare systems of allied countries actually function, or he is constructing a narrative designed to create the impression that he is a tough negotiator who can impose his will on other leaders. Whichever is the case, the outcome is the same. The credibility of the US is damaged, and allies are placed in the awkward position of having to publicly contradict the words of the US president. From the issue of drug prices, Trump quickly shifted to another equally controversial topic, Greenland and Arctic security. At Davos, Trump claimed that he had reached a framework of a future deal related to Greenland and Arctic security. However, as with many of his previous statements, he offered no concrete details.
Can you go into what you just talked about with the NATO meeting?
Well, we have a concept of a deal. I think it's going to be a very good deal for the United States, also for them. And we're going to work together on something having to do with the Arctic as a whole, but also Greenland. And it has to do with the security, great security, strong security, and other things.
All the public heard was a familiar phrase, ideas about a deal. This vagueness immediately raised concerns in Europe, especially in Denmark, which holds sovereignty over Greenland. NATO representatives later confirmed that there had been no discussions whatsoever about transferring Greenland's sovereignty away from Denmark. In other words, there is a wide gap between Trump's statements and diplomatic reality. This not only raises questions about the accuracy of Trump's remarks, but also forces allies to wonder whether Washington is pursuing a coherent strategy or merely issuing impulsive statements for domestic political purposes. Greenland is not a minor issue. It is directly tied to Arctic security, strategic competition among major powers, and NATO's role in the region. When a US president talks about an open-ended deal with no substance, it does not inspire confidence. On the contrary, it deepens suspicion. Allies worry that such statements could be exploited by adversaries or weaken the unity of the Western Front. Another consistent theme in Trump's remarks at Davos was his attitude toward authoritarian leaders. Trump has not concealed his admiration or goodwill toward figures such as Vladimir Putin or Alexander Lukashenko.
We had a good speech. We got great reviews. I can't believe it. We got good reviews in that speech. Usually they say he's a horrible dictator type person. I'm a dictator. But sometimes you need a dictator. But they didn't say that in this case. And no, it's common sense. It's all based on common sense. It's not conservative or liberal or anything else. It's mostly, let's say 95% common sense. And that's what we have. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's such an honor. And if we can ever help, you're going to let me know. And I have a pretty direct line.
Many observers have criticized Trump as someone who likes dictators and dislikes allies. And this year's Davos only reinforced that perception. Praising authoritarian leaders is not merely a matter of rhetoric. It sends a dangerous political signal that democratic values, the rule of law, and traditional alliances are no longer top priorities for the US. For allies, this erodes trust. For adversaries and authoritarian regimes, it creates opportunities to exploit divisions within the Western Bloc. All of these elements, from the drug pricing story and the call with Macron, to the vague statements about Greenland, and the attitude toward authoritarian leaders, do not exist in isolation. They are interconnected, reflecting a leadership pattern based on exaggeration, a lack of policy understanding, and a disregard for diplomatic consequences. Davos, rather than being a place where the US reaffirmed its global leadership, became a stage where these contradictions were laid bare before the international community. When Trump shows sympathy toward authoritarian leaders and openly expresses admiration for strongman-style governance, the message sent is that democratic values are no longer a required standard in relations with the US. This weakens Washington's soft power, which has long depended on its image as a defender of democracy, the rule of law, and a rules-based international order. This contrast becomes even clearer when Trump repeatedly criticizes or creates tension with Democratic allies, while using softer language toward authoritarian leaders. For many observers, this is no longer just a matter of personal style, but a troubling political trend. It upends the traditional priorities of US foreign policy, placing allies on the defensive while giving adversaries more room to maneuver. The cumulative result of all this is a gradual erosion of trust. Trust does not collapse overnight. It is worn down by each inconsistent statement, each unverified story, and each vague declaration. This year's Davos felt like a cross-section in which many long-simmering problems surfaced at once. It revealed a growing gap between what Trump says and what the US government can actually do or is willing to do. On a broader level, this raises fundamental questions about the global leadership role of the US. For decades, the US has led not only through military or economic power, but through its ability to build alliances and forge consensus. When that consensus is replaced by unpredictability and exaggeration, leadership becomes more fragile. Other countries begin to look for alternatives,